Hey guys, Tyler Mahoney here with TrumanLakeFishingIntel.com. I'm here with Steve Blake, longtime guide on Truman Lake. We're sitting here at beautiful Sterrett Creek Marina where he goes out of for his guide trips. He's got a short little drive to work, about 5 minutes at the most every morning, which is pretty awesome. But he's been fishing this lake for years and he knows the ins and outs of all the different species, and that's why I wanted to sit down with him, and he's going to be doing a lot of the talking here because he's the expert and he is going to break down the seasonal patterns of largemouth, crappie, white bass, hybrids for us, and we're just going to kind of let him get into the dirty details of that. So Steve, we're moving into October right now. We're right at the tail end of September. It's been kind of a tougher, September seems to be kind of a transition month. What do you expect? Let's just start with largemouth bass as we go into October. What, in your experience, what's the deal? What should folks be looking for?
Once the backs of the coves and the creeks, the major creeks, turn over, which I think is pretty much done now. You can see even here in Sterrett Creek, the water's kind of cleared back up from that brownish green, scummy looking stuff.
Yep.
And the main lake begins to turn over. You're going to see these fish transition to the back ends of stuff. When they do that, it's just stupid fun. Square bill. I like a big spinnerbait, a half-ounce spinnerbait, chartreuse and white with a wider chartreuse trailer, a number 6 single gold blade, a thumper.
Okay.
You're not going to catch a lot of small fish on it, but when you get bit,
Give me a good one, huh?
you get bit. And on the really difficult days, if you get a very drastic drop in temperature with a high blue sky, black and blue jig again. I mean, that's standard on this lake when things are tough. But that spinnerbait and square bill, in the dingier water with the square bill, I like the chartreuse black backhorns belly. In the cleaner water, Tennessee shad. You know, silver black backhorns belly. And square bill spinnerbait, hard to beat in the fall. Even a rattle trap. Rattle trap could be very effective. And of course, you know, you can get your top water bite too. I like the poplar and the whopper plopper. But you know, you'll pull in a pocket this time of the year and you're looking for shad. Right. I mean, if the food's there, the fish are going to be there. Now, if you pull in a pocket and your shad are in these long schools doing this on top of the water,
get on out of there.
Adios. Okay. You pull in a pocket and you got several areas where the shad are spinning in a tight circle, something's feeding on them. More than likely largemouth. Right. And that's the pocket you want to concentrate on. And that square bill underneath those shad is deadly. And spinnerbait the same way. Just gives them something different, other than all those little 1.5 to 3 inch shad. Right. And it can be a lot of fun. A lot of fun that time of year.
Do you expect that square bill and spinnerbait bite to last all through October, November? Does it die down and move on to something else?
Until you get below 50 degrees.
Okay.
Once you get below 50 degrees, then you get into your wintertime patterns. And winter and early spring until, you know, from the time you get down in the high 30s in the water temperature until you come back to 45, just a jerkbait. It's hard to beat. These fish very, very seldom go really deep on this lake. You will find some on a grub or a gets-it, baits like that in the winter, but you get a bright, sunshiny day, temperatures in the 40s, not a lot of wind, you can have a blast with a jerkbait in the wintertime on this. And these fish in the wintertime are different species. Okay, you go from a fish this long weighing 1.5 pounds to a fish this long weighing 2.5. And they're that big around. They look like they're eating golf balls. And it's a lot of fun. I gave you an example. A buddy of mine and I went out one day. 44 fish in 4 hours on a jerkbait. 24 of those were keepers. And nothing giant, but the majority of them were 3 to 4 pounds of the better fish we had. And of the 24 keepers, I would say that 80% of them were in 3 to 4 pound class. But you're looking at fish that long. 16, 18 inches.
And they're just gorgeous.
And they're just gorgeous in the wintertime.
Now, you had mentioned that this time of year, just kind of going back to the fall, there's certain areas on the top water that is pretty key to focus in on. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Well, as you said, transition. Early in that transition with the top water, those fish are they're wanting to go, but they're laying there waiting for that water temperature for the shad to move. And I've been finding them on shallow water next to deep water. Points that are flats on one side and river channel on the other. Humps with like a shallow hump, say 2 to 3 feet of water, dropping in 35 with a river channel or creek channel cut. And that top water is just, it's been a poplar and
that bee really
a whopper
likes
flopper. That bee's, get away from me. Top water and a whopper, or a poplar and a whopper flopper.
Yeah.
And now once that transition happens, they'll start sliding back on those banks. Okay, and then they'll finally wind up, and they will usually follow the channel. Okay, very seldom will they get on a shallow flat, get way back. Okay, when they go into these places, they're going to follow that creek channel. It's kind of a highway. So that square bill in the middle of this transition fished through the standing timber and everything along the edges until they get all the way back where the square bill, the spinnerbait, the rattle trap, things like that work. Those edges are important.
Yeah.
But you're talking about all of this happening in a 2-week period.
Right.
From now till say the end of the first week of October, and they're going to be there, especially with the weather we got coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, things are looking good. I mean, I saw in the forecast where, I mean, as much next 7 to 10 days. Yeah.
You got to edit this.
He must think you're awful sweet.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting down nights that are 40, 50 degrees here the next 7 to 10 days.
Right.
So water temperature is probably going to be dropping pretty quickly.
Yeah. We get to that 65, 60 degree mark, a whole lot of things are going to change.
Yeah.
And that's the time to go shell. The white bass, the hybrids, the crappie, the largemouth.
Are you much of a buzzbait guy at all on the largemouth?
I am, but I miss a lot of fish on it. And that's why I like the spinnerbait.
Yeah.
Okay, I can fish that big thumper. I can wake it on an active day when the fish are really biting. And I can slow roll it on an inactive day, tight to the cover, when it's not as good a bite, and I don't miss near as many fish.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when you say wake it, you're talking pulling it right below the surface,
Right.
where it's touching the surface.
Using it just like a wake bait.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
And that produces some pretty bone jarring stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's awesome. So you were getting ready to mention some stuff about the crappie and the hybrids and the white bass. So before we move in more into largemouth throughout the year, I wanted to touch on those species in the fall and winter time. Right now, and you talked about it in your fishing reports the last several weeks, this could be one of the best years you've ever seen on the white bass. So I wanted you to go into a little bit more detail what folks need to be looking for in the fall for the whites and the hybrids.
It's idiot fishing. Okay, anybody can do it.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to use that term.
Yeah.
It just gets easy.
Yeah.
They will get on these windy chunk rock points, the shallower, flatter points with the wind blowing in, fish-sized chunk rock, and you can catch them on a poplar. You can catch them on a roadrunner. You can catch them on inline spinners. I like the Blue Fox, the 3/16 ounce and 8-pound line spinning gear.
Okay.
And they fight hard. And the hybrids will be mixed in with them. And most of those hybrids will come on a top water bait.
Yeah.
If they're going to hit that top water. It's just fun.
Yeah.
I mean, what I tell people, when it's at its height, from the time the water temperature hits 60 to 65 till it gets below 50 for that month or 6-week period, if you can't catch 25 to 30 fish a day a piece, you've had a slow day.
Yeah.
And most time it's more than that.
Right. Right.
And you get in the right areas, and it's not just certain specific parts of the lake. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, you just stay moving till you catch one or two, and then concentrate on that bank or that area, and there'll be a bunch more.
Yeah.
Now the thing of it is, earlier this year, we had white bass in that 6 to 8 inch, 10 inch category coming out of our ears. I mean, you couldn't knock them off, and they're kind of a nuisance.
Yeah.
And now those fish they grow a pound, pound and a half a year. Those fish are a pound, pound and a half, pound and a quarter, pound and 3/4, and they're everywhere.
Yeah.
I had a trip the other day. They weren't up shallow yet. We found them on a hump in about 15 to 18 feet of water. And once we found them, I mean, I told these gentlemen, we hit 2 or 3 spots, they're not here.
Yeah.
If you're not seeing them on that graph, you're wasting your time.
Right.
And I pulled up on the spot, and I'm like, we're in.
Yeah.
And we had triples 4 or 5 times. I mean, all of us hooked up.
Yeah.
And wound up getting our limit out of there in less than an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But when they go to the bank, it can be a lot more fun. I mean, my favorite way is the top water.
Right.
You're messing with 2, 3 treble hooks, but the little inline spinner is a little bit easier. And I will change the hooks on that and make them a little bigger so they don't swallow it as bad.
Yeah.
But that time from 60 to 65 till it gets below 50,
that's the time.
Anywhere on the lake.
Anywhere on the lake.
Just find those windier banks with the fish-sized chunk rock points.
Yeah, because I know the lower lake traditionally has been very popular for hybrids specifically, and even white bass around the dam, KK Island, but it is nice to know that you don't have to come to this area to find them.
No, I've caught them really from Bucksaw down, from Tally Bend down, but my favorite area to concentrate on is the dam area in the lower Grand. That seems to hold some pretty good concentration.
Yeah, and that goes for white bass and hybrids both.
Well, that's the thing. You'll catch white bass, you'll catch hybrids, you'll catch largemouth, you'll catch Kentuckys, you know, that time of the year up on that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, they're usually not quality largemouth. You know, your quality fish are going to be farther back. There'll be a mixture.
I imagine you probably hook into the occasional walleye at times.
We do, especially on little spinners.
Yeah, that's an awful lot of fun. Those are good eating fish. So we talked about largemouth going into the fall and the water temperature. What about the crappie? What do folks need to be looking for?
You will see them transition 2 different segments, in my opinion. Some of these fish will go from summer pattern, brush piles and trees on the flats, to the bluffs, which is traditional winter pattern on this end of the lake. And some of them will go back in the creeks. I can remember some years back, my son and I, Christmas Eve, and we had a very mild fall, and we were in a old mill pond in the back end of, I believe it was Clear Creek or Brush Creek. I think it's Clear Creek. There's an old mill pond wall, and there's kind of a deep hole in front of it. We're fishing a jig and carp on Christmas Eve, 3 foot deep in this little hole. I mean, half an acre.
Yeah.
And crappie after crappie after crappie. The next day it got down to 6 below 0, and that was the end of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of these fish will go back shallow for the fall, just like the white bass, or like the largemouth do.
Yeah.
And some of them will move to the bluffs. Now, traditionally, the winter pattern for the crappie, you're going to get on a bluff, and I like to fish the bare bluffs. They like rock, especially with the number of black crappie we've got taken over now. Our black crappie populations are exploding, and they're good fish. I mean, they're fat, they're healthy, they're thick, and they're more aggressive. And just a bare rock bluff, and I've caught them as shallow as 12 feet and as deep as 25. Once you find the depth in the winter on those big crappie, you got it made. And I use strictly jigs. I like the Bob Bates winter jig head, pink head. It's a specialty jig that he does. It's a 1/4 ounce head with a little short hook. Okay. And I use a swarm jig. I'll bite about half of the front of that jig off to prevent short strikes. And we will get on a bluff, find the preferred depth, see where the fish are laying, drop that jig down, pick it up about a foot off the bottom, and go along as slow as you can go. And it's just thump, thump, thump. That's all winter long.
Now, are you still using the 9-foot rods at that point in time? Do you switch tactics at all?
9-footer with 8-pound tufts. That's my standard throughout the year.
Okay. Well, good to know. So we've touched on crappie, we've touched on white bass and hybrids and largemouth through the winter. We talked about largemouth, that jerkbait bite, coming on in the wintertime when you get down in that, you mentioned the 30 to 45 degree range?
Anything mid to upper 30s to 45. Once it gets to 45, then you're looking at early spring jerkbait fishing.
Yeah.
And that can be when you see the biggest fish this lake produces. I like the palm at that time of the year.
Now, something interesting you had told me that I wanted you to share a little bit with. I mean, you go on YouTube and you watch how do you throw a jerkbait for wintertime bass fishing, and people are talking about cast it out, and you've got to sit there for 20 seconds and then give it a twitch. Now, that's not necessarily the case here on Truman Lake, so I know you think that's kind of funny because that's just not what you've seen. So I was hoping you could share more about your experience.
You know, I have fished with some of the best jerkbait fishermen that know this lake. And it's pop, pop, stop. Pop, pop, stop. Pop, pop, stop. Pop, boom.
Yeah.
You know, and your bite is more of a toop, just a tink when they hit it. But a lot of times you'll go to pop it and they're on. You don't even know it.
Yeah.
That sit down, wait a minute, twitch it a little bit. You don't need to do that at Truman.
Yeah.
It's pop, 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 and maybe a 1 to 2 second pause.
Yeah, which is contrary to the popular belief.
Well,
that you see.
But the popular belief comes from Bull Shoals, Table Rock, North Fork, where you're dealing with 10 to 15 foot of water clarity.
Gotcha.
Okay? Here, you get more than 3 foot of water clarity.
Yeah.
Or 4, it's very unusual.
Right.
So, no, you don't need to wait all that time.
Now, what kind of setup do you like throwing the jerkbaits on as far as rod and reel? Line.
I will normally run 10-pound test
on
a bait caster, 7.5 foot rod with a very flexible tip, but a little backbone, so that when they suck that bait in, it's got a little give to it.
Yeah, it loads up a little bit.
The 10-pound test, you tend to, and I very seldom ever use a deep diving jerkbait. Most of the time it's a Smithwick Rogue, and my favorite colors are Clown, Tennessee Shad, the Clown in dingier water, Tennessee Shad in the clear water, and very seldom no more than 10-pound test.
Yeah.
You just get better action out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've covered some of the fall and winter patterns. We didn't really get to go into detail yet on the fall to winter transition.
Right.
So I'm gonna let Steve kind of chat a little bit more about that.
Yeah, basically, I mean, my rule of thumb: once the water temperature drops below 50 degrees, these fish will come back out, and you get into that winter pattern we talked about for largemouth with the jerkbait. It's not every day, don't get me wrong, you're not going to come out here and catch 40 fish and 20 keepers every day.
Right.
It can't happen. The days when you've got, say, a 5 to 10 mile an hour wind, bright sunshine, mild temperatures, which for us in the winter maybe 40, 45, those are prime for that jerkbait. And I say the Clown and the Shad imitation colors. That Clown is hard to beat.
Yeah. Well, even for walleye in the springtime when we're throwing jerkbaits for them down in Stockton, that Clown color is the ticket. Right. Now, you had mentioned Pommy is where you like to do the jerkbait in the winter.
In the winter, the lower Pommy and here in the dam area are two of my favorites, and also in the early spring.
Okay.
You know, as these fish move out and go to the winter patterns, which is normally steeper points close to deep water. For example, we pulled up on one on that particular day that I previously mentioned where we had all the fish. We took 8 3-pound fish on 8 casts. And it's just, I mean, boom, boom, boom. But it's not that way all the time.
Right.
But you're going to catch some really, really quality fish through the winter and early spring. And once the water temperature gets back to, say, 45 to 48, until it hits that 52, 53 range, where you're going to go to the spinnerbait or rattle trap, something of that nature, square bill again. That early spring bite comes in after the winter.
Now, what about the Pommy and is it a water clarity thing that you like, or is there something just different about them compared to the Grand, the Tebow, the Osage?
I think not so much anymore, but initial impressions from years back, less pressure. Not many guys will run the palm. Okay, you have to know exactly what you're doing and where you're at. If you're going to go from here to Mill Creek or Sap Landing, you better know what you're doing, or you're going to be buying older units at profit. And I think that's the big thing. It just doesn't get as much pressure.
Yeah. Well, when David Ryan and I were up there a month or so ago, it was, I mean, he knows the lake really well, and as someone who doesn't get to spend as much time, it was very intriguing just to see. The lake was low at that point, and man, yeah, there's a lot of stuff to be worried about. That is for certain.
There are places up there right in the middle of the channel that if you don't know to go around them, I mean, right in the middle of the channel, there's some huge, huge stones. Especially there at Buzzard Bluff.
Saw them. Well, that's really interesting on the fall to winter transition. So we've covered that transition. We've covered the fall. We've covered the winter. Let's kind of get into, we're coming out of winter. We're coming into spring. Let's talk about that transition, but then kind of go into that springtime pattern as well.
Well, for the largemouth, when you hit that, as I said, 45 to 48 degree range, until you get to 52, 53, which is usually only a couple weeks at the most. Again, the dirt bait. I like the dam area, the lower Grand, the lower half of the T-bow arm, the palmy. And take that jerk bait and hop your main lake points. That's where they're going to come out and get up on there. They've been there all year, but they're going to come up shallower and more consistently. And then once you hit that 52, 53 degree range, then they'll start migrating to their spawning areas. When you get to 60, 62, of course, you're going to get the spawn.
Now, let's talk crappie in this time frame. Down here and in your experience, what are they going to start doing?
Normally, here's my rule of thumb. From the time the water temperature gets below 50 until the spawn, okay, the cold weather months, I fish a jig exclusively. Once the spawn is over until the fall transition or into winter, all minnows. Now, a lot of guys fish all jigs, but from my perspective, most of my customers are not extremely experienced fishermen, and the minnow, they just
eat better.
They feel the bite better, and they catch, because a jig is an immediate hook set. With a minnow, you got to, they'll pop it 4 or 5 times and kill it where they take it. And it's just easier for my customers to catch their own fish with a minnow in the hot weather.
Right. Makes sense. Now, white bass and hybrids, from what I understand, folks stop targeting them throughout the winter time. In the springtime, I guess that picks back up. Fill me in.
In the winter time, you can catch them, but most of the time they will be in the deep water, suspended under the shad balls, and it can be very difficult. Now, I have caught some jigging a spoon, 50 foot of water, 30 feet down, under schools of shad, but it's not nearly as productive as it is at other times of the year, and there's too many crappie and bass to be caught to be messing with something that's so difficult to do. That's just me. I like fishing that jerk bait in the winter. I like fishing that 1/4 ounce baits jig on the bluffs in the winter, and chasing something that doesn't really want to bite. I kind of gear myself and my customers. I'll say, "What are you fishing for today?" And they look at me and go, "You're the guy. Let's fish for what we can catch, what's biting." And that's the way I've kind of, let's go for what's biting, not target a specific species. But in the wintertime, they become difficult, the whites and hybrids.
So when do you start to see that pick up again?
Usually early to mid-May.
Okay.
And about 10% of our whites and hybrids will run up in the creeks on this end of the lake and spawn. On the very upper ends in the rivers, different story. But on this end of the lake, about 10% of them in March and early April, you can go back in some of the major creeks and catch them. the rest of them will spawn out on Main Lake humps.
Yeah.
And that usually happens around mid-May, and it will last into early June, July, and then they just kind of stay in those areas for the summer.
Right.
You know, and Main Lake humps are,
you
know, you got all the old pond banks and holding bank, pond banks up at KK Island. You got the humps up at Berry Bend. You've got the weir. Okay, when they're running water in May and June, July, consistently, you'll have 40 boats sitting on that weir, jigging spoons or throwing sassy shads or small white jigs. And every one of them be catching fish.
Now, for folks who don't know what you're talking about with the weir, can you describe what it is?
Okay, the weir is a man-made structure that comes out of 45 feet of water at normal pool, up to 12 feet, and drops into 90 in front of the dam. Okay, right in front of the gates from rock point to rock point, it's very narrow, say the width of a boat on top. And it's an angular shape with a flat top. Now, once you get either side of the dam where the rocks start, you know, away from the gates and the turbines, then it's a big flat. It is shaped like this. Okay, here's the weir. Then it comes out, makes a point, and shoots off like this in different directions. And that's a flat, that's a flat, this is narrow. Okay, that front drop, unlike any other place you've ever fished, and this is true on Truman throughout. Normally you would look for fish on the eddy side of something, okay? On Truman, if you're fishing a hump, the weir, a ledge, where the current's coming in and goes over and the eddy's back here, they're gonna be on the front side. That's largemouth, whites, hybrids. Crappie even will feed like that. They're going to be in the front side, not in the eddy like anywhere else in the country. And on that weir, you're going to come out off of the flat or off of the wall, say in 12 foot of water, and you're going to go down 14, 16, 18, 20, 25 in a couple boat lengths. And that front edge is where you want to concentrate. That's where those fish will be stacked.
Gotcha. No, it's awesome because I think some folks have not heard of the weir or heard it be called that, and they don't know what it really looks like under there. So, and
the purpose of it is why it was built. You take lakes like Bull Shoals, Taneycomo, North Fork. Okay, when they run water. Okay, if they haven't run water for a week, and the river down below is 68 degrees, and they open that thing up 200 feet down, and that water's 52 degrees. And it hits that river and it shocks fish. Okay, well, trout can survive that. Not many other fish can. What the weir does, coming out of 45 feet of water, you got your warmer surface water, you got your colder water below the thermocline, and it hits that weir. It brings that deep water up to mix with the surface water and reduce the amount of cold water. It raises the water temperature before it goes through the dam, so you don't shock the fishery and kill it off.
Gotcha.
That's why that weir was built.
That's pretty fascinating.
To mix the water temperature. And a lot of people don't know this, but actually from the old haul roads, because they couldn't get trucks, the Tyrex trucks out there, the big trucks, they had to build a red clay haul road to get the rock out to the dam. There's actually another kind of semi-weir that runs off of the Shawnee Bend Beach House that's only 10 to 12 feet deep on top.
That's pretty fascinating. I mean, just really cool, just stuff that people don't know about. So that's really neat and kind of explains why some of the fish like to hang out. Now, something that some of the other guys talked about too with that current was talking about with crappie, if there's heavy current, they'll be on that current side of the tree. And to drop it down and just let that current bring your bait into the tree. So that plays perfect into what you were talking about as well.
Well, after the spawn, post-spawn, and then you got a lot of water running, those crappie will get on the weir just like the white bass and a largemouth for that matter, and walleye. The two biggest walleye I've ever caught in this lake, a 10 and an 11, came off the weir. And one on a jig and one on a spoon, you know, fishing for something else.
Goodness gracious.
Post-spawn, if you've got steady generation, you'll find crappie in these current funnels. And they'll be stacked. I mean, the cut through at KK Island on the front side, on the river channel side where it starts to drop. I've sat there and caught a limited crappie, a limited white bass, same day.
Yeah.
You know, they're opportunistic.
Yeah.
You got all that current funneling through, and they're laying there, just picking off the bait fish.
Yeah.
And the bait fish aren't getting blown by. Everybody says, well, the wind had the fish blown up, the bait fish blown up on the bank. Well, no, it didn't. Shad can go wherever they want to go, despite the wind.
Right.
What it does, it concentrates what the shad like to feed on, the algae and the planktons,
Right.
and things of that nature. Then the shad move in, and the fish move in to feed on them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Makes perfect sense. Now, we've mentioned some stuff about the post spawn. We didn't get a chance to actually talk about the spawn on crappie, and everyone always wants to fish the spawn on crappie. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that here on the lower lake, the lake in general.
Well, you're looking at a 4 to 8 week period. Okay, everybody says 8 weeks. Oh, well, depends on the area of the lake you're in.
Yeah.
Okay, now up around Deepwater.
Yep.
Up at the Red Bluff. I don't know if anybody's ever run a boat that far.
Yeah.
But in Deepwater Creek, Highway 13 Bridge, that area, you're looking at early April, mid-April. Okay, and as that progresses, you're coming on down. Our bee buddies.
I was gonna say, and the bee's liking me now.
Anyway, as that, shallower water warms up faster. Shallower water warms up faster. Okay, so the spawn's going to start up there, say early April. Clinton, Osceola. What am I wanting to say? Tightwad.
Okay.
In that area.
Yeah.
Up the T-bone. Okay. Then, as the deeper water begins to warm, your spawn just progresses down the lake to where here in the Sterrett Creek area is probably the latter part. You know, the latest time the spawn takes place. I've caught fish in late May still spawning down here.
Yeah.
So that's what a lot of people don't understand. Well, you know, I got to come the 3rd week of April. I got to come the 1st week of May.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on the area of the lake you're fishing.
Right.
Because it can be 3 weeks later to 4 weeks later from there to here.
Right.
And what I look for on the spawn, early spawn, when it's just starting, you want to get as far back as you can get. And then later on in the spawn, I've actually got one area. It's a main lake hump with about 3 feet of water on it and some stump cover, that the last place that I find spawning fish, and in numbers.
Yeah.
And at normal pool.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because not many people fishing.
Now, is this about the time you're switching to minnows, or are you still doing jigs?
No. During the spawn, once the spawn starts, I'm fishing the jig.
Okay.
You know, through the winter and through the spawn, I'm fishing the jig.
Okay.
Post spawn, my favorite time to fish is post spawn. That late May, June, July, August. September sucks because everything's transitioning, and we're seeing it at the bass tournament. The weights are going down.
Yep.
The crappie fishing's not as consistent.
The catfish tournament out of here this past weekend, it was like, I don't even know if it was 25 pounds to win.
September is a transition month where the fish are scattered because of turnover and water temperatures and various other things. But cold weather through the spawn, jig. And I love, now during the winter months, I'm fishing that 1/4 ounce pink head with anything chartreuse, and white, chartreuse and black, chartreuse and red. You know, and that 1/4 ounce head, and a lot of people say 1/4 ounce, that's awful heavy for crappie. Yeah. But you're fishing, I fish 8-pound test Berkeley big game. It's my favorite line. I don't like braid. That Berkeley big game has good knot strength. It's very abrasion resistant. In fact, I use Berkeley big game pretty much exclusively on all my rods from 6-pound test to 20. Right. It's inexpensive, but that 1/4 ounce head, when you're fishing in the wintertime, it's heavier, it gets down quicker, it keeps your line tighter so you have better feel. Right. And if you're moving along, say at 0.2, 0.3, your jig's not sweeping way back up here.
Right.
It's staying at the depth you want it at, just off the bottom a couple feet, a foot or two. And that's why the quarter ounce. Now in the spring during the spawn, what I'll normally do is get out the 12-foot rods, 10-pound test, Berkeley big game, an 1/8 ounce jig with the weed guard. And the little fiber weed guards, you've got 8 or 10 of them on there.
Yep.
I will peel back 3 and take a fingernail clipper and cut the rest of them off. And then I'll take those 3, and where the bend of the hook is, and here's the weed guard, I'll cut them off about 1/8 of an inch above the bend of the hook. Okay, because they usually stick out like an inch. And the fish will push the jig away. And that's what I use in the spring on a 12-foot rod with 10-pound test. And we'll let out like 18 to 24 inches of line and just parallel the bank. Like this. Okay, you're throwing that Roadrunner or a jig and cork, okay? I made a cast here, and I made a cast here 8 feet away, and I made a cast here 8 feet from that. I'm covering every inch of that spawn bank, paralleling with that long pole. And you just set the hook, raise the rod up, pull out a little line, grab the fish. Done. I've gone right behind people that are throwing Roadrunners and jig and cork, and caught fish that they're missing because they're not covering every inch of that prime area.
Makes perfect sense. So, and pretty simple.
And with that weedless jig, you know, you come right over the cover. And as long as you snap that hook set, you're going to drive it.
Now that jig, is that the one that you're talking about that Bob Bates makes, or is
he does make them?
Okay.
There's several people that do.
That's interesting because I've never really used a whole lot of weedless jigs for crappie, so that's pretty fascinating. Probably gonna have to add that to the old arsenal.
It's for guys that like the jig fish brush piles. You can sit back from a brush pile and throw it over there, and it'll just bump through. You know? Unless you happen to hit a cut or an edge. You know.
So we just talked pretty in depth about the crappie spawn. We touched on the bass spawn a little bit, getting back into their spawning pockets, but I don't know that we went really in depth. I wanted to see if you had any more thoughts on the bass spawn.
45-degree angle banks, always been the standard on Truman. Pea gravel, anywhere there's an indention, a drain. And what I mean by a drain is you're coming down a bank that's maybe really steep, and then there's a little runoff or drain that comes in. It's got a little indention, a little niche. The gravel's broken down more. If you got a little cover there, so much the better. Again, my favorite spawn bait, the black and blue jig. Black lizard, blue tail, and a green pumpkin, red flake plastic, whether it's a brush hog, a beaver, things of that nature, a biffle bug. Those are the spawn baits that I like.
Absolutely. Well, that's freaking awesome. So, a lot of really good notes on the crappie, the bass, the white bass, and the hybrids when they start picking up. We haven't quite gotten to the summer patterns. We touched on that in another video, but I kind of wanted to recap a little bit more as we move out of the spawn into post-spawn. We're getting into summer patterns. So what are your thoughts on the bass after the spawn? What are they doing? What do people need to be looking for?
Main lake points. You know, I mean, that's where they're going to go to feed. They're going to come out of their spawning areas, transition, migrate out, main lake points, especially if you've got water running, which we normally do on a
normal year.
When we're not 44 feet high,
right,
or whatever it was last year. But they're going to get on those points. And then pretty much points, ledges, drop-offs, and brush piles on flats all through the summer. Some of these old stump rows, crappie and bass will be on. The ones that, when they cut the timber on this lake, cut most of it about 2 feet high, the old fence rows and that. If you know where those are, they're submerged. They can be hot spots, but points and drop-offs and ledges. River channel ledges, river channel points, where you have the channel swing come in on one side and a flat on the other, and work on those ledges.
Now, you had mentioned earlier, and I'd heard this quite a bit, that the bass don't ever really go that deep in this lake. I don't think we got too specific, but I think I've heard you mention in the past, like 6 to 12 feet is probably about the deepest that you.
I've caught them deeper.
Yeah.
Not necessarily fishing for them, but maybe fishing for crappie or white bass. But you know, it's very unusual to have to go more than 15 feet.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I mean, all this summer, and you know, I get very few bass trips. Everybody wants to take some fish home to eat. I don't kill bass.
Right.
All my bass trips are catch and release, but they just, I mean, like I said, black and blue jig, 10-inch power worm, plum, red shad, green pumpkin, red flake, plastics, brush hogs, biffle bugs, beavers, things like that. And on this lake, you don't want to pump up and drop down. Pump up and drop. You want to drag and shake. Drag and shake. Now the jig, they'll pop it. The plastics, you better be watching your line. These on plastics, Truman bass and anybody that fishes this lake, tournament fishes or is a good bass fisherman will tell you, they're the softest mouth fish in the world on plastics. You know, a lot of times you'll go to pick up and you think, well, I'm on a limb or whatever, and all of a sudden it goes,
It's so.
You very seldom ever feel that. Or it'll be, oh, it's a perch.
It's so funny that you say that, because the last few times that I've been out with David Ryan and I've been fishing the big worm, that's exactly how they bit. Every single one. None of them absolutely hammered it. It was like, man, that could be just a little tick of a branch, and then and then it just starts pulling or it starts swimming, and you're set the hook. It's fascinating.
These fish on this lake are the soft. If you can catch bass on plastics on Truman, you can catch them anywhere. Because they are the softest mouth fish on plastics I've ever seen.
Summertime.
You know, a lot of people will. My fishing report, it's hit a lot on the website. Okay. And I'll have people say, "We haven't done a fish report for 2 weeks. You haven't done one for 3 weeks in midsummer and midwinter." Well, nothing changed. You know, patterns in November, December, well, late November, December, January, early February, or through February, those 4 months, doesn't change much. Okay. Same way with July, June, July, August, into early September. Summer pattern. Winter pattern. They just really don't change that much unless you get a drastic fluctuation in water level. Okay. So, you know, it's consistency at that time of year. Those are my favorite times to fish because the fish are consistent, the conditions are consistent. Spring and fall,
a little more
transition. Everything's moving. Everything's adjusting the water temperature. Everything's adjusting the water level. So that's why I don't do my reports as often midsummer and midwinter.
So if someone wanted to book a trip with you, though, it sounds like summer and winter is probably the best time to do it. Not that you can't go find fish, but as far as consistency goes,
you know, Truman is such a good fishery. I mean, I fished Sardis, Enid, Grenada, Archibutler, Bull Shoals, Northport, basically everywhere in the Midwest. Rend Lake, Crabtree, all of that. I've never seen a lake that has as many bait fish in it as Truman. It's unbelievable the shad populations that we have. And for this lake to keep producing the numbers and the size of fish that it does for crappie, white bass, hybrids, and the hybrids have to be stocked. Our commission does a heck of a job. Largemouth. Year after catfish. Year after year after year after year after year. You know, most lakes, after that 6th or 7th year, they kind of hit a peak. Not here. I've been here since 1984. How many years is that? And I've never seen a year where, you know, we've had some fluctuations in the bass population, but and a lot of that's due to pressure or poor spawning conditions. These high water years we've had the last 2 or 3 years, our spawn's been fantastic and the fish are showing it. It's just unbelievable what this lake will produce year after year.
Well, and to that point, there's been a lot of short bass caught over the summertime in these tournaments in that 14 to 15 inch range. I mean, Yeah, it sucks for the tournament guys, but it's really good.
That's the future.
Yep, really good for the future.
I know this spring and last spring, let's say late spring, right after the spawn, and we're dipping, long pulling minnows in the trees, and you get down there about a foot, boom, and be a little bass like that long.
Yeah.
So we had some good bass spawns.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which bodes well for the future.
Absolutely, and I mean, we're hoping with the website, hopefully going to bring more we're hoping that we can get some of those bigger tournaments back to, you know, have some big time events and be a lot of fun. And but this summer, over the summertime, it was taking 20 to 23 pounds to win a tournament.
Yeah. Now that we're in transition, it's 17, 18.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that'll change.
Yeah.
That'll change. Yeah, all through early spring and summer, I mean, if you didn't have 17, 18 pounds, you didn't get a check.
Right. Yeah.
And that hasn't been the case in years past.
Right.
Here, I can remember 2-3 years ago, 12, 13 pounds in midsummer, you were getting a check.
Yeah.
So our bass fisheries come back well.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And the crappie here has been stellar. I mean, Jeff Falconberry and Richard Bowling always talk about it. And people want to come fish the spawn when the crappie are on. They're like, crappie are on all the time.
Yeah.
It is just a hell of a lake.
It is. The populations and the numbers, you know, we don't have the size of a Sardis, a Grenada, Arcabutla, or what's the one in Greenville?
I can't.
Crappie Masters goes to all the time.
I can't. Off the top of my head, I can't remember.
Washington.
Okay.
Lake Washington. But the numbers, they're here.
Yeah.
They're here.
And I mean, it might not have a lot of those super giants, but we've got some quality fish.
1.5 to 2 pound fish.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
even on this end of the lake, which is not known for great big fish, we're catching some 12 to 14 inch fish.
Right.
You know.
Well, and a lot of the crappie tournaments here, where it had been taken, I mean, Richard was talking about it, I swear 10 years ago, 9 to 10 pounds to win. Now it's taken 12-ish, 13, give or take.
Right.
So
that's 7 fish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 1.75 pounds, almost 2 pound average.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
Well, and you know, electronics have changed that a lot. They really have. The live scope. And, that's changed things a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so awesome that here in Missouri we're blessed to have a lake like Truman Lake that is relatively undeveloped around the lake. I mean, 'cause it's all core ground around it. Right. It doesn't get beat up by all the big.
A lot of people don't understand. There's 110,000 acres of public property around this lake that you can hunt.
Yeah, and there's pretty darn good hunting.
Yeah,
I know for a fact a few of my buddies have some big old bucks they're trying to chase on public ground right now. So it's just a hunting and fishing son of a gun around this area, which is awesome. Steve, was there any other topics that you wanted to get to, or are we ready to wrap up?
You know, I mean, we've sat here and shot the breeze for about an hour now.
Yeah.
You know, by no means do I know it all.
Yep.
Just offering my opinions on the seasonal patterns and what I've experienced. I've learned a lot from other fishermen and people on this lake that they've taught me. I have guys. I had a gentleman here not long ago. He's just now getting into tournament fishing, and he's like, "Well, you think this is going to do this? If that's going to do that? Is this going to do this?" And I looked at him. I said, "Stop overthinking.
Yeah.
Stop making it more complicated than it is. Go fishing."
Yeah.
You know, you can read all the books and watch all the videos and listen to all the seminars you want. Nothing beats time on the water.
Right.
And being aware of your surroundings, like we discussed just a few minutes ago at the break. Okay, we're sitting here. There's not a cloud in the sky. Barometric pressure is sky high. We haven't seen a sparrow on the dock. Yeah. We haven't heard a bird sing. We haven't heard a crow call. We haven't seen a bluegill around the dock. We haven't seen a shad come to the top of the water.
Right.
Be aware of your surroundings.
Yeah.
You know, a day like this, it's going to be tough fishing. Downsize, slow down. If the birds are singing, and the gulls are flying, the shad are flipping, fish are busting, cows are mooing.
Yeah.
You know, be aware of your surroundings. That's going to tell you how to fish.
Yeah.
That's about my wrap up of the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that, because that was gonna be one of the things that I wanted to end on. Was a lot of what we talked about today is not really rocket science. It's pretty
Guys
simple.
tend to make fishing a lot more complicated
Yeah.
than what it is. If you overthink it or underthink it, it can bite you. Go fish.
Yeah.
Spend time on the water. There's an old saying that 10% of the fishermen catch 90% of the fish.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very true.
Yeah.
To some extent. Because they know how to watch their surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
They know that one little thing that makes the difference in catching fish and not catching fish in presentation or technique.
Yeah.
So if I was going to give anybody any good advice that really loves the sport, spend more time on the water.
Mm-hmm. And this year was a good year to do it.
Oh yeah, we've had a fantastic year.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I just want to thank you very much for sitting down with me, being a member or a contributor to Truman Lake Fishing Intel. You are a member, you're on the website too, but we're very blessed to have Steve Blake as a contributor to the website. You can find him at the Sterrett Creek area on their website. His contact info is all over TrumanLakeFishingIntel.com. Steve, will you give your phone number again one more time?
660-525-0692.
Yep, and he's guiding all year long. So
not as much anymore as I used to.
Yeah, and he's winding down.
I'll be 70 in January.
Yeah. So you got to get in while the getting's good before he decides to hang it up. And
I'm not too far from that.
Yeah, because you're gonna miss out on
maybe another year or two.
Yeah. Well, we'll have more videos to come with Steve. Don't worry. In that year or two that he's still getting after it, and we'll look forward to those as we do them. And again, we appreciate Steve Blake so much for being a part of TrumanLakeFishingIntel.com. Be sure to reach out to him, book a trip, and you're sure to go out and catch some fish on Truman Lake. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll catch you on the next one.